Well, it's October 24th, 2014. My life changed drastically. I had gotten up in the morning expecting that I was going to spend my day with my family and I would be watching the Kansas City Royals play the second game of the World Series. That was the plan. But about 10 o'clock in the morning, I came up here to the church, and there was a little piece of equipment, and I say little. It's the smallest kind of scissor lift, single-person lift that you can kind of get, and it was designed for reaching our projectors up here. As myself and the rental company guy were bringing that lift into the facility, it tipped over on me. And as a result, I broke my leg. And when I say broke my leg, it wasn't kind of like just a little crack or whatever. It broke in two. I mean, I could show you the x-ray, but none of us probably want to go there here today. So I was taken by ambulance to Albuquerque, and later that night, instead of watching the World Series, I went into surgery and they put a rod in my leg. The very first question that I asked my wife when I awoke from surgery is, did the Royals win? So you got to have priorities, right? So I didn't expect how it would change my life. I really didn't expect that life would be altered in the way that it was. Over the next several weeks and couple months, I was unable to drive. I spent about 4 to 5 months in physical therapy and even going through the process of learning the coordination of how to walk again. And that's not something that I expected to do in my early 40s. But that's something that happened in my life. And I'm going to tell you that through that adventure, something happened. I'm a very independent person. I like to cook my own food. I like to put the portions that I want on my plate, and I like to carry my plate from the kitchen to the dining room. That's how I roll. For about 2.5 months, I wasn't able to do that because I was on crutches. I like to drive. If we go on a trip, and it could be a 16-hour trip, most likely I will drive the entire time. I like to go the speed I like to go. I like to stop when I want to stop. But I wasn't able to do that. I can tell you that I went to a really dark place. In fact, I remember one time trying to get up out of a chair and not having the strength to do it. And I told my wife, I don't want to do this anymore. And my wife, being the kind and compassionate person that she is, said, what other options do you have? I know that I had friends that would text me, and I wouldn't call them back or text them back. They'd call, and I wouldn't call them back. They would email, and I wouldn't email them back. I just kind of went into this inward place. One of the things that I realized during that season of my life is that I was tired. And I wasn't just physically tired, I was spiritually tired. I realized that I've been here at Valley View for about 13 years, and for those 13 years, I'd have the foot on the gas. Let's just put it that way. I'm a type of guy that just likes to run and likes to push forward and push through. And one of the things that I realized is that not only was I physically tired, but I really had ignored my spiritual life. And I was spiritually tired. And I really wasn't, at that point in time, really sure what I needed to do other than, I just don't want to do this anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to do ministry anymore. I didn't know if I wanted to, this whole Christianity thing, I started kind of having some conversations with God. Kind of like, if I was doing what I was supposed to do, why did this happen to me? And so it's not like it was really that bad of a thing compared to what a lot of people have to go through, but It was the greatest physical challenge of my life, and it became one of the greatest spiritual challenges of my life. And during that time, there were a few verses that just kind of rose to the top. I wouldn't say that they were my favorite verses or my life verse up until that moment in time. But at that point in time, everything changed. At that point in time, these verses from the book of Hebrews, if you want to go ahead and turn there, these verses in the book of Hebrews became more important and more real than what they ever had in my life. I would point to them, I would talk about them and different things like that. I'd love to preach the passage, but it was at that point in time, in the midst of being incredibly tired and incredibly just kind of defeated, that I realized that the Bible has hope and the Bible speaks. So today I want to read from Hebrews chapter 12, but before I get there, I want to kind of outline the book of Hebrews and just highlight that I don't know who wrote the book of Hebrews, but we know kind of what it's about. And one of the issues that was happening is I think the church had gone through a period of persecution. They had gone through a lot of suffering. I don't know the extent of it, but the reality is they were tired. And actually, Hebrews chapter 10 kind of points to the tired and says, don't give up. Don't stop. Don't quit. And then Hebrews 11 is a chapter. In fact, I would encourage you to go home and read Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11 is called the Hall of Faith. And it talks about all of these servants of God who lived by faith, who when they were weary, when they were tired, did not give up and did not give in. And then we get to Hebrews chapter 12. And these three verses just spoke. I just spoke in a real way when I was probably at my lowest point in life. It says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, the cloud of witnesses is pointing back to those in Hebrews 11, those who have endured and remained until the end. And that list, the by faith, by faith, by faith, that refrain is to allow us to think that list is much larger than what it really is. Let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. Now, ordinarily what we do is I kind of work through the passage and then reach a bottom line near the end of the sermon. I'm going to kind of flip that over this morning. I know we're getting like really crazy. And I'm going to give our bottom line right now. And so the bottom line that I kind of have written down is when you're tired and you feel like giving up, don't. Okay, I'm going to say it a little bit nicer. When you're tired and you want to give up, the Bible speaks. I'm going to say the Bible speaks clearly. The Bible speaks with clear hope. The Bible speaks with motivation. And the Bible speaks with very clear direction as far as what we are to do when we are tired and we want to give up. And ideally, the message from the book of Hebrews is when you're tired and you want to give up, don't. When you're tired and you want to give up, keep going. Press on. Go with endurance. So it begins here with a little bit of athletic imagery. Actually, this would have been where modern-day Olympics came from. It's the idea of those who are running the race. And I get this just a little bit. And tell you, I'm from Western Kansas. Being from Western Kansas, track season starts in March. And if you've ever been in Western Kansas in March, it can be a little chilly. In fact, it can be downright cold. And add to that the 30, 40 mile an hour winds, track meets were not always fun. In fact, I look at this and I remember our track coach. He's old school. In fact, when he would talk about Nikes, he didn't call them Nikes. He called them Nickies. So he was like really, really old school. But Coach DeVore, on all the other teams, and it's 35 degrees outside, and the wind is blowing, and different things like that, they were allowed to wear their sweats. And that was about the time that tights and biker shorts and different things like that were coming out. People were wearing those. He said, you will wear your school-issued uniform. So if you know anything about track uniforms, it's fabric in name only. I mean, those things are like paper thin, and like booty shorts and different things like that. You're not wearing much clothing. And this is what he said. The less weight, the less resistance, the easier it is to run the race. And what we find here in Hebrews chapter 12 is very much that way. In fact, in verse 1, and I'm going to read this out of the New International Version, it says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. So it mentions a couple of items here. Number one, that which hinders. It doesn't necessarily say that which hinders is sinful, but I believe that there are things that will happen in our life that are distractions. Would you agree with that? That it's not sinful, but it's not necessarily beneficial in our journey with Jesus. So for example, how many of you, when you got up this morning, immediately went to your phone, checked Facebook, checked your email, checked on see what's going on in the world around us? How many hours a day do we spend on our phones, tablets, and computers? How many hours a day do we spend on TV? In fact, it's getting ready to be, 13 days. 13 days from today. Does anybody know what that is? College football, baby. And it's so good because I've already checked the schedule, and OU plays early and K-State plays late, so my wife and I will not have to watch football in separate rooms so we can watch our teams. And I'm looking forward to it. But how many times do we just spend on stuff that's not necessarily beneficial for our walk and our journey with Jesus? So there's that which hinders, but there's also the sin that so easily entangles. And I love that picture because here's the reality. When a runner would run the race in the first century, they would remove their robe, they would remove their cloak, and pretty much everything else. At best, they ran in their Fruit of the Looms. But they tried to rid themselves of everything so that they could run the race. And so the picture here is, whether it be sin, and sin entangles, and sin captivates and pulls us off of the path altogether. And then there are things that just distract us while we're on the path. There are those things that need to be rid of in our life. And I want to say it like this, and it's a little blunt, but I'm a little blunt as a person anyway, so that kind of works. But it says, I'm going to say it like this. When you're tired and you want to give up, deal with your stuff. This is stuff. This is on you. There's a lot in life you and I can't control. Am I correct? My kids call me all the time. They talk to me all the time. Somebody said this. Somebody did this. On and on and on and on and on. You can't control other people, but you can own you, and you can own your own life. And so you have to deal with your own stuff in life. But it doesn't just stop with that. I want you to do something here today. I want you to go back. I want you to go back to high school graduation. Maybe college graduation. Maybe that first job that kind of takes the form of career. I want you to go back, maybe your wedding day. So go back to that period. I'm going to say 18 to 25 in your life. You had goals. You had dreams, am I right? You had aspirations. You envisioned happily ever after. You envisioned 2.5 kids, right? A dog and a mortgage. How did it all work out? How many of you on social media have ever had that one friend that everything is absolutely, astoundingly perfect in their life. My wife has a friend on social media that literally could compete with Martha Stewart. Her life is so perfect. I mean, holiday meal, it is just impeccably decorated. It's just, and you ever look at those people and go, I can't compete with that? Like my wife often says that we evaluate 100% of our lives based on the top 5% of somebody else's. But what we tend to do is we tend to look at other people and say, why don't I have that life? Why don't I have that job? Why don't I have that marriage? Why don't I have their kids? Because my kids are rotten. You ever do that? I never do that, by the way. I'm just going to tell you. But we always look at everybody else and we think, and then we look back on our dreams. We look back on what it was supposed to be, and we think that something is wrong. That somehow, some way I've messed up, or even worse, God has messed up with my life. How many of you listen to K-Love Radio? K-Love Radio is a Christian radio station, and so on. It's a national radio station. They kind of put themselves in major metro areas and different things like that throughout the United States. One of the things that happens on K-Love is they have these famous preachers, these big-time preachers get on and give their 30-second, 45-second minute sermonettes, and they just wax eloquently. One of the guys that's on there is Judd Wilhite. Judd is a preacher in Las Vegas, Nevada. 20,000 a weekend, 8 campuses, different things like that. He's pretty big time. So that's pretty impressive. I knew Judd when he was just Judd. I actually knew Judd when he was Judson. He was the first person I met at Dallas Christian College. Moved into the dorms and so on like that. This guy comes, knocks at my door. It's Judd. So he and I went to classes together. We did stuff together, kind of hung out, different things. On my 21st birthday, my wife threw a surprise party that did not work. You want to know why it didn't work? Because when we got back, I was with 2 other friends who were keeping me away from the house and so on. When I got back to the apartment, I saw Judd's big, green, ugly Ford Bronco parked way, way far down. I was like, there's only one person I know. It was the most distinct vehicle in the world. So the surprise didn't really necessarily work. Graduated with him. And here's something, I got the award for most outstanding preacher of our graduating class. And what my friends and I call that is you cannot give everything to Judd award. And that's basically what that was. So anyway, but I'm putting it on my resume anyway. So, and I've often looked at that and thought, why don't I have that life? Because he and I are definitely on different paths. And for a lot of years, I wondered why. And I'm just going to tell you that about 8-9 years ago, Tara and I actually went out to Vegas, and we were at a conference, and I contacted Judd, said, hey, Tara and I are going to be in the area. You want to do coffee, do lunch or something like that? And so we started talking to him, and I realized I'm thankful for the path that God has put me on. I mean, I don't have a security team that follows me around everywhere in the church. Tara and my kids do not have security teams that follow me around everywhere in the church. This actually made national news a couple of years ago. A guy drove through the main entrance of their church building because Judd would not meet with him privately. Worst thing that happens to me in my life is a cow is out on Venus on my way home. It's... And so I look at that, and I'm thankful for the path that God has put me on. But so many times we can, you know what wanderlust is? You kind of wonder, I wonder if my life was this, and I wonder if my life was this, and I wonder if my life was this. And before long, we're blaming God for the path that we are on. And so I'm going to say it the way that my wife would say it. And let me first read what it says at the very end here. It says, let us also... and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And I'm going to say what my wife would say, and I don't know where she heard this. Stay in your lane. When you're tired and you want to give up, stay in your lane. Live your life. Live the life that God has given you. You don't have to live somebody else's life. You don't have to live somebody else's life for them. You simply have to live your life. You get to stay in your lane. And sometimes your lane stinks. Am I right? Sometimes your lane is difficult. But be careful. Be careful, because God has a plan for you being in your lane. Let's go ahead and move on. What do we do when we have difficulty in our life? What do we tend to do when stuff starts breaking? When health is less than optimal? What do we do when all of this stuff is just kind of going on in our lives and it's just not right? It's just not what we planned for. I don't know about you, but I have a pity party. Okay? I tell you, over the last couple of months, I just tell you, garage door, septic, air conditioner, hot water heater. Anything else? I'm sure there's more. I mean, it's just been like one thing after another, after another, after another, after another. And it's really easy to just focus in on that, obsess about that. But I think one of the things that we need to do is not necessarily just stay in our lane, but when we're tired, when we want to give up, I think we need to change our focal point. We need to change what we look at. We need to change what we focus on. Because here, I want to read in verse 2. It says this, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of God. Let me give you a little Greek lesson here today. I know you did not come for a Greek lesson, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. I want you to understand what it means here when it says looking to Jesus. It literally means your focus, your attention is on one thing. So let's just say it's your problems. It's everything that's not going right. It's that you don't have the right life. So you're focused here. It says looking to Jesus. So it literally means taking your focus off of one thing and fixating on another. Okay, you got that? So it means that we're to focus on Jesus. So as we're focusing on Jesus, what is the tendency for us to do when we know that our problems are over here? Right? And then we look back to Jesus. And we just come back and forth and back and forth. When it says looking to Jesus, it means set your eyes there and don't take them off. And I think there's a reason here. It says that he is the founder and perfecter of our faith. I want to just kind of unload these words just really quickly. Founder means that he is the military leader who is walking ahead of his troops into battle. Founder means that when you talk about founders' days, we always talk about those who settled a particular community, and oftentimes the community is actually named after the founder, right? It's also the trailblazer. I love that word. How did America move westward? Trailblazers. People who went out ahead. Actually, in many ways, they opened the path. So Jesus, as the founder of our faith, he is the one who opened the path. He established the path. But it also says he is the perfecter of that. He is the perfecter of the path that we are on in life. He is the one who's opened it. He is the one who has perfected it. He is the one who has given us the Holy Spirit to guide us on that path. Why do we look to Jesus? He created the way. So it's not just about focus, though. When we're tired and we want to give up, there's one more. We have to shift our minds. We have to shift what we think about. I want to read verse 3 to you here today. It says, consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. Consider him. I'm going to tell you something. In our world today, there are certain words we have stopped using in the church in favor of other words because we're afraid that we're going to sound like these people over there. One of the things is rainbow. You don't want to talk about the rainbow anymore because that's something altogether different than what God designed it as. The rainbow is God's promise. Talk about the mind. The mind is one of those things. We don't want to be self-help. We don't want to be Oprah, Dr. Phil, or whatever it might be, right? But I'm going to throw out a word here today that I know you're going to get a picture in your mind as soon as I mention it, and that's probably why it's been hijacked. It just shows us how real that is. The word is meditate. So when I think about meditate, what do we think about? Funny guy in a robe, bald head, crisscross applesauce doing this, right? That's what we think of with meditation. I don't believe that. Because here we are told to consider him. And when it says to consider him, it's fixed thoughts. We are to think about Jesus. We are to think about what Jesus endured. We are to think about the fact that he created the path. We are to think about the fact that he opened the path and that he has established the path for you and I to get to God. We are to think on that. So why? So we not grow faint-hearted or weary on our journey. Think on Jesus. I want to tell you that in my own personal life, meditation is fuel. I love to study God's Word. I love to tear apart God's Word. I struggle with prayer. That's probably one of my weak areas in my walk with Christ. But when I read something in Scripture, you know what I love to do? I love to be in silence. Silence is so nice. And to think about that. Take a quality of God. Take an action of Jesus, an attribute of Jesus, and just think about it. And when we think about it, I'm going to go back to the old hymn. And the things of earth will what? Grow strangely dim. Right? When our eyes are on him, when our mind is on him, we begin to understand that we don't have to grow weary. We don't have to be tired. We don't have to give up. Because there's Jesus. So here's what I know. When we're tired, when we're weary, the Bible speaks. The Bible speaks incredible hope into our lives. And so when you're tired and when you're weary, I'm going to encourage you to be the Christian version of John Stephen Aquari. Anybody who know who John Stephen Aquari is? He is the most famous Olympic loser in history. The year was 1968. In 1968, the Olympics were in Mexico City, and he was a marathon runner from Tanzania. One of the things that the distance runners did not plan for Mexico City that year, they said, was the altitude. That it is much like Albuquerque. And so many of these people who are on sea level didn't really know how to adjust and how to run in that particular environment. 18 of the 75 runners in the marathon didn't finish because they grew weary and tired. 12 miles in, Aquari got mixed up with a group of runners and he stumbled. As he stumbled, his knee, they said his kneecap became dislocated. It was bloody. His shoulder was banged up. His head was banged up. And as the medical team came to him, they said, just stop. Just stop. But Aquari was insistent that he needed to continue. 1 hour, more than 1 hour, after the gold medalist crossed the finish line, Aquari entered the stadium to do his final lap. Sometimes running, sometimes limping, sometimes walking. Most of the people had gone home. For all intents and purposes, the Olympics were over. It was the last race. The 60 or 70,000 people who saw the winner enter the stadium had left. There's just a couple of thousand people. But eventually he crossed the finish line. When the reporters came to him and said, "Why? Why finish?" This is what he said. "My country did not send me 5,000 miles to start a race. They sent me 5,000 miles to finish a race." Jesus did not come from heaven to earth for you to start a race. Jesus came to run the race for you. Jesus came to open the path for you and I, and he came so that this Spirit might descend upon us and guide us in the race. So if you're weary, if you're tired, stay in your lane. If you're frustrated, if you're bewildered, fix your eyes on Jesus. If you want to give up, if you feel defeated, consider him who endured such horrible shame at the hands of sinful men, that you might not grow weary or faint-hearted. Walking, running, crawling. Finish the race. Receive your crown. Will you join me?